Welcome, everybody. It is the April edition of the Frontline, the official KARDS podcast, and we have a big one for you. It is finally time. It is finally time to talk about KARDS Mobile. We know you've been waiting for it. We've been getting the question every single podcast, when is mobile coming out? And it's finally coming very, very soon. I am your host, Christo. I am joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Elin. Elin, how excited was the community when you finally put that date of June 6th out there?
I think it was the biggest excitement that we've had since I started working at 1939. It was just a resounding yay. Like I almost heard it from the office, just the whispers from around the world. Everyone is really hyped about this one. And we are so hyped as well. We're really excited to be finally bringing you this product that we've been working on for such a long time.
It feels like the culmination of so many pieces coming together. And I know we'll get into it, so I don't want to dive in too deep, but you had the UI change that was a big part of it. You have some of the card rotation that's going to be a part of it. It just feels like there were so many projects finally coming together in this moment on June 6th. Though it is an exciting time, but you did not come alone. You brought a friend to walk us through a little bit around the development process here to get us to the point we're at today.
I did. We're welcoming today Tuomas. He is a programmer in the Helsinki studio and the lead of mobile development. So he's going to be telling us all the highs and lows of the mobile development journey and diving a little bit into some technical details.
Awesome. Welcome, Tuomas.
Yeah. Viewers may be familiar with me from the Discord channel with the nick Karma. So Tuomas Karmakallio is my name.
Awesome. Welcome. We're excited to have you here. Do you want to take a quick minute to introduce yourself?
Well, briefly, I'm about 20 years in the mobile development in Finland. I've been working on a huge variety of projects and variety of companies, and bit tense right now. Gonna loosen up a bit.
But obviously KARDS and working on this project has been your favorite, right? This is number one for you.
Well, it's been a very, very much a jump into the dark for me. Like, it's the first time I'm working full time with Unreal Engine, and I didn't know any of the people. Like some dudes from Iceland, like, hey, we need some people in Helsinki. And okay, well, let's see what this is about. I played the game for a week or two before making the decision to jump ship.
Awesome. Love that you took that initiative to say, hey, I want to make sure this game is something I want to get behind. So I can absolutely appreciate that. Let's get into some of the details here, and we can start by knocking just a few things off the list to make sure everybody's comfortable with exactly what's going to happen. So first of all, KARDS, obviously you can get it on PC. This is Android and iOS at the same time, being released on June 6th. Yes?
That's the plan.
Awesome. That's not always the case. I know certain app stores are a little bit more challenging than others, but exciting to see those should both be released at the same time. And then on top of that, if I am playing on PC, can I end up playing against somebody who's on mobile, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. We're totally cross-platforming it.
Amazing. Elin, anything I missed in the way of just like those checklist little things that I want to make sure everybody is familiar with?
One more thing that I do want to make sure that everybody knows is that, you can play on the same account, regardless of whether you're playing on PC or your mobile device. We will have like a full account sync. So it's the same account, the same progress. And like you mentioned, you can be playing against your friends, whether they are on a mobile device or PC as well. So incredibly exciting.
Amazing. All right. We got all that out of the way. Now I have to ask about the big giant elephant in the room. I've been working with KARDS for, 2 years. And I feel like we've been talking about mobile for 2 years. Obviously, it's no secret that the project has been delayed a couple times. Any insight, Tuomas or Elin, if you want to add some color as well, as to what went on, what made this such a challenging long road?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit of the backstory. first, like before I even came on board, there was a first pass on mobile support that was actually outsourced. And they got it pretty much working with a separated user interface, but it was still not quite there yet. And then it got sidelined for a year. So that's where I come in, and I start, looking at what have we got here. We got some builds up, and quite quickly we had a list of over 100 things that were broken over the year that it was not in active development. So that led us quickly to the reasoning that trying to have two separate user interfaces is problematic. Every time you're changing something in one place, you need to check that it works in the other as well. And, that's just a recipe for disaster. So at that point, we said, okay, we got to scrap that plan. And then we started fitting the original user interface to a mobile, just to sort of sanity check where we're at with that. And took a couple of months, and then we did beta 1 with the old user interface kind of shoehorned onto mobile. But, that was seriously considered for release, but it had a lot of hacks to get it to just barely fit. And it just wasn't good enough, basically. There was so many usability issues, and we figured it would just sink the game with bad reviews. So the next step was to plan a proper, single, flexible user interface. And so I don't remember the exact timelines here, but once we reached beta 2, that was like kind of getting there. It was showing that it works, but there was still heaps and heaps of stuff to do. And the estimation of the size of the project was a bit skewy. Like everything just took twice as long as the predictions. The estimations can be really tough in areas that are not totally familiar. And, sometimes any given task might take an hour or it might take a week. And the larger the workload you have to estimate, the more you tend to underestimate, even if we count in some buffer multipliers and try to adjust for surprises and whatnot. And of course, since we had this opportunity to overhaul the systems, we wanted dynamic front pages. We're coming out with a new shop even, and we've got space to expand for new features. And, it wasn't just get the thing to work. It was, I don't know what I would estimate, maybe half the user interface is just remade from scratch. So yeah, it took a while.
Well, like you said, there were so many factors that kind of played into that. And Elin, I do want to ask you, because being, the face kind of to the community, how important was it to make sure that that interface and that experience was kind of seamless between the two different platforms?
Of course, that's really, it's really crucial. And I think that from a development standpoint, especially, having two separate user interfaces simultaneously just increases so much your overhead on anything that you're introducing. And I've said this before: we're a small team, we're an independent developer, and so we really need to be very smart with how we use our resources. And there were also kind of, and as we discussed in the last episode about the user interface, there were definitely opportunities that we saw for improving things. The user interface really hadn't changed very much since the game started, and we'd gotten a lot of feedback, and we also just felt ourselves that there were things that could be improved. And so to kind of marry this and create the one user face to rule them all was a really a critical part here. And also, as Tuomas is saying, it is so critical to make sure that what we're delivering is what players, a good product for the players. We don't want to deliver something that just isn't good or isn't the experience that people have gotten used to on PC. And so I think that may, have played a huge part in kind of how long it's taken. It's really just because we wanted to give you the best experience possible. And of course, to improve the overall experience as a part of that.
I think that's a great point as well. Just the fact that, as you've mentioned before, you are a smaller developer with limited resources. So taking a little bit more time to set things up properly for the future is important as well. So it can be more efficient in the updates that you make and things like that, where you're not going back and editing two completely different platforms and completely different UIs and all that as well.
100%.
Now, Tuomas, you, as we got into the conversation, you mentioned that kind of joining this project was like diving into I forget what you said, into the darkness or something like that. What did you kind of mean by that statement?
Well, I had a very comfortable job and I was, hitting my stride in the company I was at pretty well. Like I was getting more responsibility for projects, and I'd learned so much during that 4 years at KARDS. Shout outs to them, great company. It's actually an outsourcing focused company and one of the oldest in Finland still. And but yeah, I was already pretty tightly bound into that system there. Like I was, had very strong opinions on how things were working there, and I was very vocal and very involved in the processes within the company. So it wasn't an easy jump out. But yeah, I think what really weighed the most for me was learning Unreal Engine in an environment where there's already a game built around something that I wanted to learn.
Awesome. And so, we've obviously talked about the challenges and the delays in getting KARDS Mobile up and running. I imagine there was some good parts to it as well, right? There must have been some fun in that. Sure.
Like I'm enjoyed technical challenges quite a lot, and well, first off is of course the user interface having to be super flexible. So we're supporting from aspect ratios 4:3, which is PC and tablets, and then we're going up through these different aspect ratios, which are more familiar on PC, like 16:9 and 21:9, but on a very tiny screen. And then we ramped up all the way to like ultra wide monitors, 32:9. And so everything really has to just work, just be flexible, be properly anchored. And then we have this trick with a UI scale where we just scale stuff with one single variable. And that's actually exposed in the client now on PC, so people can also mess around with that. If you want to see things a little bigger, if you want to see things a little bit smaller, that's in the options now. But yeah, that's a huge challenge, and my line was from the beginning that we want to make the absolute minimum of compromises on diverging between platforms. And at the moment, I believe we've accepted that the deck builder is one area where we will accept some divergence because it's just so much more comfortable to work on a big screen PC. And opening packs is actually another one which we will allow to have, two somewhat separate user interfaces, but everything else should be, just one chunk.
And you've mentioned that a lot, where you want it to be one experience across the two platforms. So as you're developing mobile, obviously the UI was a huge important part. That's what the players are interacting with. Was there anything else as you were going through the process that you were saying like, hey, we have to make sure this behaves the same way or interacts the same way, kind of on the back end, that wasn't necessarily something that's as in your face as the UI is?
Yeah, well, I might mention, for example, just the basic usability differences between mouse and touch. There's challenges there. Basically, if you look at a lot of games, like if you try to do too much with a touch, if you try to do a tap, a drag, and a long tap in one element, that's starting to be too much. So yeah, that was big, but our UX expert you saw in the last podcast, Juha, has been our main driver on keeping things shipshape on that front. The bug life has been quite fierce as well, but a big part of what I've been doing here is improving our development pipelines. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. And generally just dealing with how the project has been growing. It's been like getting larger and larger. Typically, you start with a small game and, it's all fun and games and you build something nice. But then this house you build in the first years, it starts extending in a lot of directions, and there's a mixed bag of parts and architects and builders. And basically, like any game design document you think we might have that's outdated within months, basically. So, it's a lot of flying by the seat of your pants and just accumulating knowledge and sharing knowledge in just via speech and forums, the Slack and whatnot.
You've mentioned a little bit there around obviously the development pipeline and the fact that the game and the code and everything on the back end evolves as you go through it. So what kind of process do you put in place to make sure that, hey, we can continue to adjust and add on as necessary, but then also be able to handle any type of bugs that may come? You're going to release this on June 6th, and you're going to have an influx of players that is likely going to test the system and uncover things that you may not have expected to see. Like, how do you keep all of that in line to make sure that you can continue, that standard development piece and tackle everything that comes your way in a efficient manner?
Yeah, it's not easy, and especially with a small company, it can be tough sometimes. Everybody's wearing a lot of hats. Like, I honestly don't code probably more than 2 days a week. The other is like project management, QA management, and all kinds of stuff. But I think there's still, there's a core process which is just based on the task estimation systems. So I'll dig into that briefly. So an unknown task might take a whole day just to understand what is going on there. And the resolution of a bug, for example, might be anything from 1 hour to a week. And I'm doing a lot of project management now, so being able to have estimates in the ballpark is pretty important. And briefly, to achieve this, we have like year goals, feature goals, release goals, patch goals. And by the time a given task is actually started, it's usually broken down into 1-day tasks. And we don't break down smaller than that, just make every task 1 day. And that tends to balance out that some of the tasks are really 1 hour, and some tasks can be more than a day. And it's very common for something you think is a 1-day task, it's going to turn into either dough or slime or ooze. So the dough task, it just keeps growing steadily as you work it. And then the slime that divides and multiplies when you slice into it. And, these little monsters then increase the time to achieve the goals, sometimes quite dramatically. And like each little monster individually may be easy, but the bigger the features, the more monsters you have, and they're lurking and out to get you all the time. And it's hell.
I think you bring up a really great point there. As somebody who is not particularly technical, you see something and you're like, oh, okay, great. KARDS is on mobile, and I'm going to press this button, and this button doesn't seem to work properly. And I'm like, it's something easy, right? It's just like this button. And it can take you a day just to figure out what's going on and why that's happening, let alone then go in, fix it, and do everything else. So on our side, we just like, this isn't working. It should be easy, right? Without knowing how that works, it definitely is not necessarily the case. No, go ahead.
The more people get acquainted with the code base, the better things get. But still, there's always hurdles, and there's a lot of cleanups to do. Like often you hit an area and it's just messy, and you have to refactor it a bit to make it sane for the next person who comes along isn't gonna, get bogged down in the same swamp again.
Mm-hmm. And something, Elin, I wanted to ask you about, just to touch on, because obviously now you're going to have these kind of multiple different streams where you've got KARDS on Steam, you've got KARDS on iOS, you've got KARDS on Android. I imagine the game plan is every time we update one, everything's getting updated at the same time. Have you and the team put in place or thought through anything specific that may arise in the way of challenges in doing that? Any concerns, or are you feeling like, hey, no, we've got this all lined up now. We took our time and we've got it figured out?
There's definitely, you can prepare as much as you want to, but I think that you always have to be ready for some unexpected things. Of course, we'll do our best to communicate to our players on all platforms, and that's also why it's so great to have the new UI with the content carousel. It means that we can actually reach everyone through this one place without having to point to this article here, or for our users on Steam who are used to seeing everything there, so that every player, no matter where you are, can get some information. But we're absolutely doing our best to prepare, but also certainly ready to have to adjust to some new realities and some new ways and processes as we move towards this full launch.
Yeah, speaking of that area, deploying the game on PC Steam is a breeze. You just press some buttons, it gets uploaded to the Steam servers, and it's there, and you can patch it like that. It's, but on mobile, it's all different ballgame. Each and every build has to go through an app review process, which can take from a couple of days to a week. And if something hitches up, then you have to iterate again. So we're gonna be definitely hardening up our pipelines, and we have to really think a lot in advance of when do we freeze and make a release candidate and make sure it passes all the tests and the reviews, and then it goes out. So quite likely we will be opening up further sort of more open beta branches for people to help us out with that.
Because I was going to say, in a game like this where it is cross-platform, it is obviously critical for everybody to be having access to the same, if you're thinking of the actual cards, if you're releasing a patch that affects the cards in the game, well, that needs to be released across all three platforms at the same time. So you do, I imagine, have to work into your pipeline, hey, it needs to be done a couple of days before to go through the app review, and you're holding off on Steam until you get, Android and Apple to go through it. Like, is that part of kind of that framework of making sure everything lines up on that release day?
Yeah, that's spot on. So, and even in addition to having to, the PC is going to wait for the mobiles to be reviewed and ready to release. When we actually click the release button on those mobile platforms, it can take up to 24 hours for the builds to actually spread all over the world. So that means that it's likely that for that approximately 1 day window, there will be a time during which old clients will have to matchmake with old clients and new clients against new clients until everything's, back in sync.
But at the end of the day, you're able to do that so nobody's affected. It's not like somebody's sitting there waiting for their update for 6 hours because it hasn't come through yet and they can't play the game. They would just get matched with somebody on the old client.
That's the general idea. However, there are again caveats where if for some reason we are unable to make the backend handle a dramatic change situation, which can be quite challenging sometimes, there may be slight downtimes for some platforms at times, I'm afraid, but we will, of course, try to minimize that.
And Elin, I imagine that's a big part of what you were just talking about. We're like, hey, you're going to have the carousel saying, we're going to have an update on this day. Maybe there's a little hiccup. Maybe it'll be a minute. Is that's going to be part of the communication, I imagine, as well?
It's definitely something that we need to make sure to think about as we go forward. I mean, at this point, whenever we have a patch going out, we do have a message to anyone trying to log in, and so that's definitely one part to think about as part of the comm strategy, to make sure that our players are as aware as possible, and from a development standpoint, also that what we're delivering is kind of as rock solid as possible, so we don't need to be doing sort of continuous new iterations of that.
Is that also? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is not set in stone how those hitches will happen exactly, but I have a hunch that PC players will have priority here, that they will be sort of on board first, and it's going to be the mobile players who will have to suffer slight delays in rare cases.
And so, with that being said, does that affect how you decide to develop and roll out updates, knowing that, in the past we roll something out to Steam, if there's a bug, we need to roll out a patch to fix it. We can just kind of do it like that and get it rolled back out. Do you now take a bit more time knowing, hey, we have to get this up on 3 separate platforms, different approval processes, different code and whatnot? Do we have to be maybe update a little bit less often, but double down on making sure that it is, as perfect as can be before getting it out there?
Yep. That's the idea. Frankly, I was hoping we would have a lot more practice of this over the last year, but we're always, riding the rabbit's back, as they say, that there's always like, we got to get this out. Now we get it out, and then it's patched the next day and whatnot. But that just is not going to be doable in the future.
Yeah, and again, I'm bringing up these questions. It's not any different than any other game you've played on multiple platforms that are all going through the same type of challenges because of exactly those scenarios, right? You get a little bit, I imagine, less control once you start rolling out things through, an app store on mobile versus having, like you said, that easy access through Steam of just getting something out there.
Yeah. That said, I'm relaxed and confident we'll deal with it.
I have no doubt. I did want to bring up something else, and we talked about it last podcast as well, where, now you've got these two teams working together in Finland and in Iceland. So, Tuomas, I'd be curious to hear your kind of experience in kind of working across the two countries, the two studios, and just see what your experience was like.
Yeah, it's this modern life of remote work is not such a big deal anymore. People have adapted to this, and I'd say it works surprisingly well. There are some differences in what might be called like company culture, ways of how things are done, but we're slowly synchronizing our gears on that area as well, quite a lot. And overall, I'm very happy with how it's gone. Like, only annoying thing is like the Icelanders don't change their clocks for summertime, so now there's a 3-hour time difference.
Fair.
The superior way.
Yeah, it is true. We should be the ones who should stop changing the clock. But yeah, so we have what is it now? Maybe at 4 or 5 hours overlap of business hours, which is still enough to get things quite nicely done. And yeah, the comms are great. The Icelandic team is really superb, and we've visited there a couple of times, and there's a couple of guys here visiting right now, and it is surprisingly painless. Like, there's, as far as I know, there's been no, how would we say, chemical imbalances or reactions going on, and everybody's liking to work with each other, and we're having a good time.
Love that. That is a great expression. There have been no chemical imbalances. I might steal that and use that. I like it. Elin, anything you want to add from the other side of things?
Mostly just how incredibly hyped we are about this. And of course, as you mentioned, we will be on both Android and iOS devices. We are aware that there are some limitations for some of our passionate players in China in accessing some of these app stores. So that's something that we're currently looking into, is kind of exploring some possible options for that. But overall, just we are so excited to bring you KARDS on mobile on June 6th.
Awesome. That does bring me back now. I'm also thinking about, you're mentioning a little bit around the beta testers and things like that as well, because you went through 2 beta tests. I'm curious, Tuomas, as to your kind of experience in going through that, and what kind of critical feedback you picked up through those 2 beta tests.
Yeah, fantastic community, basically, like super active feedback, bug reports. Particularly for beta 2, we just got pages and pages of really, really good suggestions and feedback on what works, what doesn't work. With our current sort of time scale, we haven't been able to react to even a significant percentage of that yet. But rest assured, it's all stored, and our designers have been looking through those and pondering what cherries to pick from there first, and it's really great. Like, what can I say? Thanks to all the beta testers, and I like being pretty active on the Discord channel, and I remain in good contact with the community there. And we'll probably be continuing some variants of this beta systems in the future as well.
Awesome. And Elin, as you look back on the beta test, I imagine you had no shortage of people raising their hands going like, "Oh, I'll test this. I'll try it out."
Absolutely. We had so many people participating, especially in beta 2. And like Tuomas says, like, I mean, we have such an awesome community. We have so many really passionate and dedicated people that are really excited to not only play cards on mobile, but to sit there and to write a lot of details about what they feel could be better, what they'd like to see improved. And it's been just invaluable asset to us to have access to all of these passionate people to help us make the game better. So we're so incredibly grateful for that, and those beta tests really just went pretty awesomely, I would say.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think even that last PC checkup before we rolled out the new user interface, I think that was it nearly 20,000 people played that for an average of a couple of hours each?
Yeah,
and
that sounds about right.
Yeah, even though of course we got some flack from the people who were used to the nice old clean thing, but I think we sort of got the impression that it's okay. We're good to go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully getting, players into a bit more of that beta testing like you were talking about, Tuomas, where, I get a little glimpse into the future, and I get to feel like I'm really a part of helping, cards get developed and all of that. There's one more thing I want to make sure I touch on, because I was reading the show notes in preparation for this of things, Tuomas, you thought you were important to talk about. And you have one category titled architecture, and you use an analogy in there around cats. I don't know if you've seen me sit here, and you might have seen a couple cats running around in the background. So I'm curious as to how this analogy plays out. So do you mind walking us through it?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Here we go. So I mentioned like building houses before, and for the first 10 years or so of being a junior developer, as where I was thinking that coding is just like building Lego. You have these nice blocks, and maybe you have to struggle sometimes to fit things, but mostly it's just stacking, pretty simple work. And I thought of the sort of underlying logic as pipelines running around this house, getting things done, moving stuff around. But yeah, it's not that nice. And my new way of thinking is cats. So in this new metaphor, all the actual logic is done by the cats in the house, and the job of the programmer is herding these cats around. And you start off with a couple of cats, and they're easy to get along with, but suddenly you have 100 cats and a bunch of new developers who have no idea what all these cats are doing in this nice Lego house. And to change a small thing, you have to get to know some of the cats. You have to know their names, where they're hanging out, what other cats they're friends with, and some changes to the environment of a single cat can cause surprising chain reactions to other cats you didn't realize cared at all about this one cat you're trying to coax to eat your new cat food. And but once you're familiar with a certain area, you start finding it more natural to move around and change things there, and the cats don't stress out too much. And optimally, the same patterns of behavior that you're working with these cats should be present in other areas of this metaphorical house cat space. So when you're moving to do different jobs, you have sort of consistent methods, and they're called entry points and controllers and layouts. But yeah, I think this is a much more workable metaphor than just pulling pipes around a house.
As somebody who is not particularly technical, speaking about cats and Lego is really speaking my language. So I feel that. Thank you for that metaphor. And I know, we're not necessarily getting into all the nitty gritty of the technical aspect of getting, Cards Mobile out there, but obviously there are likely some folks who are listening in who are interested and curious about some of that. Tuomas, before we wrap up, is there anything, I know you're very passionate about pipeline development and things like that. Is there anything else you wanted to cover or wanted to talk about before we wrap things up?
Well, I think it might be amusing to show some of these blueprints from Unreal Engine. And so it's part of why I wanted to learn Unreal is this blueprint system. So you're not just coding text in the traditional way. You have this visual coding system with like nodes and control lines and stuff. And I was pretty skeptical at first. I've thought it would, and I tried it out a little bit, and I felt it super clumsy compared to just banging out code on a keyboard. But they do have some really tangible upsides. Before I actually show some of those, I'll just mention for anybody who wants to like aspire to being an Unreal developer, get some plugins. They're called Auto Size Comments, Blueprint Assistant, Node Graph Assistant. They make life a lot better. They're auto formatting the nodes to be cleaner. The comment boxes are adjusting automatically to changes. But yeah, blueprint. So instead of having pages of code, you have these nodes and noodle connections. And so here's the first image of a small, pretty clean, nice blueprint. And here's the major upside. Like when this code starts growing, it can easily become what is called spaghetti because it gets messy and hard to figure out. Even in traditional text code, that's the term arose back there. But with blueprints, you can see this spaghetti growth straight away. So the next image, this is starting to get longer, it's starting to get more branches. And as time goes on, things can just get totally out of hand. And this last image, disclaimer, it's not from our project. If you do an image search for Unreal Blueprint art or go to a website called Blueprints from Hell, you can see some interesting results, which are like sometimes verging on modern art, and sometimes they're just fantastic dreadnoughts of massive things they're so hard to work with. And yeah, this is what I found really fascinating, that if you can make clean and readable blueprints, it follows that you're probably writing clean functional code. And it can even be aesthetically pleasing to look at. Like if you refactor, clean up these areas that have reached this spaghetti dreadnought stage, you can visually confirm that you're doing good work, teasing order out of this chaos. And this last image is like, this is the perfection. It's just nice, it's clean, it's well commented. And that's sort of what we aspire to have most of our code base to be, this sort of thing where if a new coder hits this area, they can just read the comment blocks, figure out, okay, what is this meant to be doing, and basically laser focus on where the fix is probably going to be needed.
So that last image, is that one from Cards Mobile?
Yeah, that's from us. We do have spaghetti dreadnoughts, but I figured we're not going to name and shame anybody here. but it's just a natural process of a growing project. It just happens. It's really hard. You have to be super disciplined and also have a lot of time, which we don't often have a lot of time to keep things clean.
And that's I imagine a huge part of it as well, right? You have the choice of cleaning up something that already exists or making sure that you push forward and continue to develop and add the new features and add whatever needs to get done before that next milestone arrives and you have to get something pushed out for approval or to release.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One more thing, some people are probably wondering why we jumped to Unreal Engine 5 so quickly. As far as I know, we're actually probably like one of the first games that jumped to Unreal 5 after Fortnite. And the reason is basically Apple. So Apple tends to want their games that they publish on their platform to be built with their latest and greatest iOS SDKs. So it was the first year I came on board, we were working on Unreal Engine 4, and this happened. Apple wanted a next iteration, and Unreal Engine 4 simply doesn't support that. So okay, let's jump to Unreal 5. And I'm glad we did that, because it, despite it being a bit painful, it is now arose the situation that, again, this happened just recently, and again we have to update the Unreal Engine to the next version. And again, it's a lot of pain, but we remain sort of on the bleeding edge of things, and that's fine. I think it's a bit different from a lot of PC games. They just lock down. They stay with one version forever after the game is released, basically. We're forced to keep iterating, and I think like we probably have, if KARDS Mobile is anywhere near the success we want, we're going to be rolling for another 5 years, and we're probably going to need 5 more updates as well.
It's all part of the process, right? And hopefully, to your point, we will be seeing that for the next 5 years and continued growth. Tuomas, before we wrap this up, any final words for the community? And I imagine they can always go bother you on Discord and send you a quick note.
Yeah, I've been super happy with how comms with the community is going, and it's been like very friendly, and basically I like talking about code and development stuff. So if people are interested in that area, I could ramble on even now for another hour easily. Like, why are we stopping?
Mark, our producer, he's got times, and he's just going to shut us all down. We'll just the screen will turn off. So gotta keep him happy.
Alrighty.
Elin, anything you want to add as well? KARDS Mobile is obviously a huge piece, and we want to make sure that everybody's ready to go and as pumped up as can be.
100%. So D-Day, June 6th. This is such an amazing historical day. This is the day that KARDS Mobile is going to be released. So make sure you mark it down in your calendar. We're going to have some extra special stuff going on. We're going to have some celebrations. So make sure you don't miss it.
Awesome. And we also have the Ultimate coming up next weekend. Officer Club Ultimate.
Yes.
First one ever.
The first OCC Ultimate will be played. Yes, on May 6th and 7th, we have a broadcast going the entire weekend. Well, one on each day. So on the Saturday, we are going to be seeing all the games in the quarterfinals. And on the following Sunday, we will be seeing all the semifinals and grand finals games, including the third place matchup. Every single one of these games is going to be showcased. Every single one of them is going to be a best of 5 series. So it's going to be some really epic games. We've got a host of amazing casters and, of course, a fantastic host ready to bring you all the action. So we're super hyped about that. Make sure you don't miss that.
Absolutely. Full-blown live celebration of the first ever OCC Ultimate is going to be a great time. Thank you so much for joining us, Tuomas, and walking us through some of that development piece and finally getting KARDS Mobile out there. Elin, it is always a pleasure, but most of all, thank you all for watching and listening to this 4th episode of the Frontline podcast. We will see you all in just a week at the OCC Ultimate.